Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope life has been treating you guys well. I know I've been gone for a little bit, but you know, life has been happening and I'm glad to be back with my first video of the year. And this is to continue on my complexion series. So if you haven't checked out my previous videos, I do find that there are a prerequisite to this one. I'm doing a lot of my videos in the order in which I feel they are important so that you can pick up the tips as you go along, thus being able to complete a look at the end of the series. So it's great for beginners. It's great if you want to brushing up on your craft, your skill. And so I hope you will stay tuned for this video. We're going to be getting into finding your shade online. I know that a lot of the services that were afforded to us pre-pandemic are not available to us anymore, and we have to rely on either previous matches that we've used in the past, or we have to kind of take a guess and kind of cross-reference. And so I want to help you guys be able to use that information to find your shade online. So this is going to be a tutorial about virtual shade matching yourself and how you can use your undertone to really get that perfect match, at least as perfect as you can get it online, and how we use the process of elimination so that this process doesn't feel so overwhelming for you. So if you want to learn more about that, then stay tuned. The first thing we're going to talk about is undertone. It's probably one of the most important parts of finding a foundation for yourself. A lot of people can tell what overtone is. Overtone is like just the shade of depth that you see on a person. So you can see when someone is fair, light, medium, tan, brown, deep, rich. Those are examples of overtone. It really has to do with the depth of like beige to the deepest of browns, whereas undertone has to do with the tone that you see underneath that shade of brown or beige, whatever it may be. And that's a lot harder for people to see, off the bat without a trained eye. It's harder to see sometimes. So let's go over what different types of undertones there can be. I'm not going to go over all of them because they can be very vast, but just to give you a general explanation on the undertones that you'll see described on makeup labels, makeup descriptions when you go into like Sephora, Ulta, or even shopping online, since this is supposed to help you to find your shade virtually. First undertone we're going to talk about is having a warm undertone. Warm undertone is a very common undertone. It typically has to do with being able to see like yellow or orange in someone's skin. So for example, you'll see foundation shades that say things like golden or a W or a G next to them in their label. That has to do a lot with warm golden undertones. So for example, I have a yellow undertone, so I am on the golden side. So when I pick foundations, I'm looking for something that is either medium deep or deep and has a golden undertone. That's usually the keywords that I'm looking for when I'm shopping online or when I'm going into a store and I see a description of a shade. Next we have cool undertones. So cool undertones have to do with how red or pink someone looks putting on their overtone, and you're typically going to see the word cool next to a shade name. You may see something like red or rich or beige sometimes if they're fair, or the letter R or P to look for in shade names when you're shopping virtually or when you're in a store and you don't necessarily see the tone there, but you can read it and know like, okay, this one has a pink undertone, has a red undertone, or even sometimes blue if you're very, very rich. Sometimes your undertone for coolness will actually be blue. And we have neutral. Neutral can be tricky sometimes because it literally is the explanation of not seeing warm or cool undertones in a person. They pretty much look balanced. They don't lean towards either side. And you will see sometimes neutral on a shade name or described as neutral or the letter N. Those are examples of like the main undertones. Obviously you have other ones you can go into, like olive. Olive is a really nice undertone that you can use if you are so yellow that you also lean like almost greenish, which sometimes I can use myself as somebody who has a golden undertone. I can use the olive sometimes. So yeah, those are examples of the basic undertones to look for in shade references and shade descriptions. So now we're gonna get into how you figure that out. So the easiest way that I always found to do this in person is actually look at your veins. Your veins are gonna be your easiest depiction as to what your undertone is. So everybody's veins are blue. However, your undertone will change the way those blue veins look. We talked about those previous undertones and we're going to apply it to how your veins would look. When your veins are looking greenish, it's an example of your veins being blue and having that yellow undertone sit on top of those veins, which gives it more of like a greenish tint to your skin. So for example, my veins here are kind of hard to see, but they have a greenish tint to them. Like they don't look completely blue. So that is an example of finding out that you have a golden or warm undertone. Same concept can be used for people who have a cool undertone, so they have pink, red in their skin. If your veins are blue, that pink or red tone is going to be sitting on top of those veins, and it's going to make your veins look like they are a deeper purple or a deeper bluish indigo tone. So they're not going to look like a standard blue. They'll look almost really deep and almost purple or violet. Now if you're neutral, of course, you have both in your skin. So if your veins are blue, they're not going to lean either way. They're literally going to look like a standard blue because you have pretty much yellow and red in your skin. So like you don't have a tone that's gonna make it lean either way. That's an example of how you can find your undertone quite quickly. This is how you would find your tone if you're shopping online and you're like, I have no idea where to even start. That's where you find your undertone, and then you apply that in reading the descriptions online when you're looking at the descriptions of the tone. So the way that this would go is a lot of foundation ranges now are pretty vast, and they have different categories of the depths of beige to brown that we talked about. So you would analyze, okay, what am I? Am I fair? Am I light? Am I medium? Am I tan? Am I deep? Or am I very rich? Depending on that category that you are in, that's where you're gonna limit down to. So you're using process of elimination here. So for me, I'm in the medium deep, or sometimes called deep tan, and depending on the shade range, I could be deep or rich too. So I'm in that category. So I look for that category first. And if it's a really good range, they typically will have maybe 1 or 2 golden shades within those, like maybe 5 or 6 shades within that category. So I'll look at those shades, obviously eyeing them, looking to see if they look too light, if they look too dark, and if they say golden or warm. Those are the ones I'm looking at. So now we've narrowed it down from a whole shade range to the category of depth of your skin. And so that's 6 shades now. And then now I'm narrowing it down to undertone. So undertone now has it down to maybe 2 shades. So this just makes it easier for when you have to figure out what your undertone would be. And it makes it easier for you to pick the right foundation so that you're not buying a whole bunch of the wrong thing and testing out product, and now you're stuck with something that doesn't match. Another thing to consider when it comes to shade finding is formulation. Formulation is actually going to play a part in how your shade looks, because if something has a certain type of finish or formulation, it may look different once it actually adjusts to the skin. For instance, hydrating foundations that are dewier, more radiant, don't tend to dry down like maybe a matte foundation would. And so they tend to stay the same shade that they are. They don't oxidize or dry down too much. And so you can pretty much pick your bright shade match with a foundation like that. That's formulated to be super dewy, has a lot of sheen to it. It's gonna reflect light. The closer it is to being something that dries down, you wanna consider picking a lighter shade than you think you are sometimes. So for me, when I'm picking a matte shade, I have to consider the dry down. How much darker is that shade gonna get once it dries down, in helping me pick my foundation shade. So when you look at something that's matte, consider those things. Also with powder, it's hard to swatch sometimes, but consider powder when you're swatching for the depth, because powder on top of something with moisture always is going to absorb that moisture and darken versus sitting on top of something that's dry. If your skin type is oily, your powder foundation is going to darken throughout the day or when you first put it on, because your oil is going to be that wet ingredient that makes it darken. As somebody who's on the drier side, they don't produce as much oil. If they're just using like their regular skincare, and the moisture in their skincare can also make it dry down or darken. So those are things to consider when you're picking out formulations for your foundation shade. Now we're gonna get into a demo. I have 3 foundations here. They're all pretty close in shade, but they're different undertones. So I'm gonna swatch them on my chest here so you can see how they look and how they differ. If you can see the tone of the foundation, it is not your right undertone. So first I'm gonna start with this foundation. This is the Sephora Stick Foundation, and this is in the color Teak. So I'm gonna swatch this right here. So this is Teak. And then the next one I'm gonna swatch is from the company Mented, Pigmented. And this is the color M10. And I'm gonna swatch that right next to Teak. The last one I'm gonna swatch is a little bit deeper, but this is from Anastasia Beverly Hills. I don't believe they make the stick foundations for them anymore, but this is the color Espresso. And I'm gonna swatch that right here. So we're gonna take a look at these colors here. Not only do you see a little bit of a depth difference, but you really do see the difference in undertone. So I'm gonna start with Teak. Teak, as you can see, is not that much darker than me, but what the very apparent difference is the undertone. This color looks a lot more orangish red compared to my skin. This has a red undertone. So what that means is when you're looking at a shade and you can see how red it is on your skin, more than likely you do not have a red undertone. You're probably either gonna be neutral or you're gonna be golden. So that process of elimination X's out Teak as a shade for me. Next we have the Mented foundation. This was in the color M10. This has a neutral golden undertone. So as you see, this is closer to the match of my skin. Now my chest is a lot lighter than my face right now because COVID, we've been inside. But this is what I would be using on my skin. There's no difference in the undertone between like my face and my skin versus the shade. So that means that the undertone matches, which means that is my undertone. I don't see the tone of the foundation. I just see that it matches, right? Lastly, we have the Anastasia foundation. Now this is more of like a tan foundation for me. This is something that I probably wear at my tannest, but this actually has like a neutral undertone. So this has a combination of golden and red tones in it. It almost leans a little olive as well. There isn't a lot of contrast in the undertone with my skin. So we have a red undertone, a golden undertone, and a neutral. This is how you would shade match yourself if you buy foundations to shade match home and maybe return the ones you don't use. So obviously I would be this one here. And so I'm going to go ahead and color correct and then apply this foundation so you can see how it looks. So right, you see how that's gliding on? You see how you don't see it at all? There's no red showing up in my skin. There's no dark like purple tones or pink tones showing up in my skin. It pretty much looks the same undertone as my skin. So this is how your foundation should look. Again, my chest is really light right now because she hasn't been outside of going to work. Which you can see compared to my face, this is a really good match. I'm gonna carry through with the rest of my complexion. My concealer also has a golden undertone, but it is brighter because I like a brighter under eye. And so you see that one is quite yellow, quite golden. And I'm gonna use that to brighten the center of the face. Now, when you're neutral, you have both undertones in your skin, as we mentioned. And so technically with highlighting the face, you can use a yellow concealer if you would like to. You can use like a peach, like an actual neutral concealer if you would like to, because warmer colors tend to reflect light more. That's why you'll see a lot of people using neutral or yellow undertones in the middle of the face. I'm going in with the Fenty Matchstick in Espresso. This has a neutral undertone. Reason why I'm using a neutral undertone for the outsides of my face is because, remember, a neutral undertone contains red as well. And red is a tone that makes things look deeper. And so for depth and for contour, I like for something that has a little bit more red. I don't always use something with a gray undertone. I typically like those on fairer skin tones. On deeper tones like mine, red versus gray. So I like to place all my stuff down. I also like to let my concealer sit. And I like to place all of my product down first. And then I'll go in and blend. Okay, so I have a wet beauty blender here. I'm going to use this to blend out my concealer. And don't mind me, I'm looking in my mirror over here just to make sure that I'm blending. So you should see like a gradient between my contour to my foundation to my concealer, the brighter area of my face. And then I'm gonna take my foundation brush and actually kind of blend out the edges really quick, because there's still residual product of the foundation on here. And that's what's gonna help to create that seamless blend so that you don't get any harsh lines between the two. So this under eye, pretty golden, which I prefer, is my preference, but I'm gonna show you how I neutralize that. So now I'm going in with my Fenty powder, and you see the color of this? You see how it's almost like a pinky beige? That pinky beige tone is actually going to neutralize how golden this looks. So now you see this looks a lot more yellow on this side than this side does. That pinky tone is neutralizing how golden that area looks. That's why I don't mind using concealers that are really golden. I mean, I am golden, but I don't mind using concealers that are really golden, almost olive in the center of the face, because I go in and kind of neutralize it with a powder like this one. That way my under eye still stays bright, but not yellow. Like not super yellow to where it's obvious. Because if I were to use like a golden concealer, and then a golden powder. Remember, I mentioned olive is pretty much the idea of being so golden that you lean green. And so I tend to like the idea of neutralizing the golden. So you see now it looks a lot more subtle, like there's not so much yellow, but I still look brightened in the center of my face. I'm gonna take this Pat McGrath. This is her Sublime Perfection. And this powder is beautiful. I'm gonna take a little bit of this with a smaller taper brush. I'm actually gonna take, this is the medium shade. And I take the medium shade just like right in the center of my face. I'm gonna do a tutorial on powders, how to properly use setting powders to brighten, to neutralize, to set, bake. I'll be doing a tutorial on that, but for today, you can just watch me use this kind of, you see that brightness it kind of gave me right in there. Now we're a little bit brighter, but again, because that tone is like neutral, I'm not looking like super yellow under the eye. Bronzer is gonna be kind of like the opposite of what I mentioned with my under eye. So now this is darker with a more red undertone to give the outsides of my face more warmth. And this bronzer that I'm using is from Prime Beauty. It is the color Bronzeville. I'm going to get into blush and highlight to finish the complexion. And I'll probably do my eyes off camera, and then we'll come back and regroup, and we can kind of sum up what we've learned from this tutorial today. And we are back. All right, guys, so I completed my eyes and lips off camera. I used the Makeup by Mario palette just to give me like this like smoky wing, but very minimal, obviously, because the lashes, which are by my homegirl Pmonet. Pmonet in the style Muse. Those are the lashes I'm wearing today. So those are my focus. And then I have on brown lip liner. I have Makeup Forever one in Limitless Brown, but you can use any brown lip liner with Honey Waffles by Fenty Beauty, the cream gloss bombs, and then a little bit of Sweet Mouth on top. This is my completed look. So you see now that everything is coming together, you see how undertone really matters, and playing of different undertones across the face really helps to bring balance, so that your face has dimension, you don't look flat. I hope this was helpful to you. I do advise that if you have any questions about undertone color theory, any brushes or tools you see me using, I do have tutorials on those for previous referencing points. And this is to continue on my complexion series. I'm going to talk about powders, highlight and contouring a little bit, and then what tones to use for like blush and highlight across the face. So those are videos to stay tuned for. And if you really like this video and really like this look, be sure to comment below, subscribe, and like the video. I want to know what you guys want to see from me outside of complexion series. Like if you want to see how I did this like smoky fox eye, let me know. Yeah, I'll be sure to incorporate some like fun tutorials within the series so that we can, you know, keep lively and we can practice. So I thank you so much for your support, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.